Last night, I felt my son David's fingers slip into my purse while I pretended to sleep. I heard him whisper my debit card PIN to Jessica, thinking they'd finally gotten away with it. But what they didn't know was that I'd been 3 steps ahead for weeks. And 45 minutes after they tried to drain my account, David's phone rang with news that would shatter their world forever. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. But let me tell you how I got to that moment, because this story isn't just about stolen money. It's about a mother's heart breaking and then finding the strength to mend itself. It was 3:20 in the morning when I opened my eyes in my small bedroom here in Phoenix, Arizona. The desert air was still and silent, but something had pulled me from sleep. Not a nightmare. Not the usual aches that come with being 68 years old, but a voice drifting through the thin walls of this house I've called home for 30 years. The voice belonged to David, my son. The same voice I'd heard take his first breath 35 years ago. The same voice that used to call out "Mama" when thunderstorms scared him as a little boy. But now, in the darkness of this October night, that voice was planning something that would change everything between us forever. He was speaking in hushed tones, almost whispering, but in the complete silence of the Arizona night, every word reached me with crystal clarity. At first, I thought maybe he was dealing with some emergency, some crisis that couldn't wait until morning. David had always been impulsive, always finding himself in situations that required immediate attention. But then I heard the tone. You know that tone people use when they're plotting something they don't want the world to know about. It's different from worry, different from urgency. It's the sound of secrecy, of conspiracy. I lay completely motionless in my bed, my heart beating so slowly I could feel each individual thump against my ribs. My body seemed to understand instinctively that I needed to remain perfectly still, perfectly quiet, to catch every syllable leaving his mouth. And then I heard it with absolute clarity. Listen carefully, Jess. She's got $87,500 sitting in that account. I've seen the statements. She sleeps like the dead, especially with those pain pills Dr. Rodriguez gave her. We go in quiet, get the card, and by morning we'll have enough to cover everything. I closed my eyes slowly, not from shock, not from fear, but from a deep, profound sadness that settled into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. Something inside me had been expecting this moment. Maybe not the exact details, maybe not this precise betrayal, but the essence of what was happening. You see, there's a moment every mother dreads, though we never talk about it openly. It's the moment when you realize that the child you raised, the child you sacrificed everything for, has become someone you no longer recognize, someone who sees you not as their mother, not as the woman who worked double shifts to pay for their school clothes, but as an obstacle standing between them and what they want. I heard Jessica's voice on the other end of the phone, breathless with excitement. I could picture her perfectly, sitting in the rental house I'd helped them furnish when they moved to Phoenix 2 years ago, her eyes bright with greed at the thought of all that money. Jessica had always been calculating, from the very first day David brought her home to meet me. Behind that perfect smile and those sweet words of, "Oh, Maggie, you're like the mother I never had," there was something cold and measured, something that evaluated every gesture, every kindness, every act of love to see what it might be worth in dollars and cents. But a mother doesn't say these things out loud, does she? A mother keeps her suspicions to herself, hopes she's wrong, prays that love will triumph over whatever darkness she senses lurking beneath the surface. David continued speaking to Jessica, his voice gaining confidence as he outlined their plan. The pin is probably something simple. Her birthday, my birthday, Maybe Dad's death date. She's old school. Jess. She won't make it complicated. Old school. As if my age made me stupid. As if the 68 years I'd lived on this earth had somehow diminished my ability to think, to plan, to protect myself. Each number he speculated about felt like a small betrayal. My birthday, which he'd forgotten to acknowledge for the past 3 years. His own birthday, which I'd never missed celebrating. His father's death date, the most painful day of my life, when I lost my husband of 32 years to cancer and suddenly found myself alone in this world, except for David. The money David was talking about hadn't fallen from the sky. It wasn't some inheritance or lucky lottery ticket. Those $87,500 represented 45 years of my life. 45 years of waking up at 4:30 in the morning to catch the early bus to the textile factory on the outskirts of Phoenix. 45 years of sewing uniforms and work clothes until my fingers were permanently curved from gripping needles and my back ached from hunching over industrial machines. Every dollar in that account was earned through sweat, through sacrifice, through saying no to things I wanted so I could save for a future where I wouldn't have to depend on anyone, not even my own son. When my husband Robert died 13 years ago, David was 22 and just starting his adult life. He promised me then, standing beside his father's grave in the desert cemetery, that he would always be there for me, that I would never be alone. And I believed him, because what mother doesn't want to believe in her child's promises? But life has a way of teaching you lessons you never wanted to learn. I heard David end the call with Jessica, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tomorrow morning, early. She won't even know it's gone until it's too late. Tomorrow morning. They were planning to rob me in less than 6 hours. I opened my eyes in the darkness and stared up at the ceiling, at the small water stain that had been there for 4 years, shaped like a butterfly with one broken wing. I'd looked at that stain every night for years, sometimes wondering if I should get it fixed, sometimes finding comfort in its familiar presence. Tonight, that broken butterfly seemed to hold all the answers I'd been afraid to face. But to understand how we got to that moment at 3:20 in the morning, I need to take you back 5 days, to the Tuesday that should have been my first warning. It was October 15th, a warm afternoon even by Phoenix standards, when David showed up at my door with a paper bag from the expensive bakery downtown and a container of my favorite coffee from that little shop on Central Avenue. The gesture surprised me immediately, not because my son was unkind, but because he hadn't brought me anything without being asked in over 8 months. "Hey, Mom," he said, settling the items on my kitchen counter with an almost theatrical care. "I was in the neighborhood and thought you might like these. Jessica asked me to stop by and say hello. She says it's been too long since the 3 of us sat down and really talked." I turned from my stove where I'd been heating water for my afternoon tea, studying his face for any sign of genuine warmth, but all I found was that smile that never quite reached his eyes anymore, the smile he'd learned to wear like a mask over the past few years. "That's thoughtful of you, David. You know you're always welcome here." He lingered in my kitchen longer than necessary, his eyes scanning the room as if he were cataloging everything he saw. His gaze stopped at my small desk by the window, where I always paid my bills and kept my important papers. My purse sat there, half open, with my wallet visible inside. "So how are things going financially? Mom, everything okay with your accounts?" And there it was. The real reason for his visit, delivered with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer. "Everything's fine, David. You know I'm careful with my money." "Yeah, of course. I just asked because Jessica and I were talking, and we think maybe you could be doing more with your savings. You know, there are investment opportunities, high-yield accounts. You could be earning so much more than just letting it sit there." I poured hot water into 2 mugs, one for him, one for me, watching the steam rise between us like a barrier. "Oh, David, I'm too set in my ways for all those modern financial things. I prefer to keep things simple. That way I don't get confused. But Mom, seriously, you could have so much more. We could help you manage it. We could even set up a joint account. You know, just in case something happens to you. Just in case something happens to me. I interrupted gently, setting his mug in front of him. David, I already have everything in order. My will is updated. My beneficiaries are listed. You don't need to worry about any of that. I watched his jaw tighten, just for a second, just a small tell, but I caught it. The mask slipped just enough for me to see the frustration underneath. It's not about that, Mom. It's because we care about you, about making sure your money is really secure. It is secure, David, very secure. We drank our coffee in uncomfortable silence after that. He stared into his mug like he was reading tea leaves. I watched him, this man who shared my blood but no longer seemed to share my values, and wondered when exactly I'd lost him. When he left that afternoon, I remained seated at my kitchen table for a long time. The pastries sat untouched on their plate. I wasn't hungry anymore. I just had that heavy feeling in my stomach that comes when you know something bad is approaching, but you can't yet see its full shape. 2 days later, on Thursday morning, Jessica came alone. That was truly unusual. Jessica never visited by herself. She always needed David as a buffer, as a translator for her real intentions. But there she was at my door at 10:30 in the morning, wearing a bright yellow sundress and carrying a box of expensive cookies from the resort bakery in Scottsdale. Maggie, sweetheart, so wonderful to see you. I was running errands nearby and just had to stop by. You know how much I adore spending time with you. She called me sweetheart when she wanted something. I'd noticed that pattern years ago. Come in, Jessica. I was just about to start lunch. Oh no, don't trouble yourself. I'm only here for a few minutes. But listen, sweetheart, I wanted to talk to you about something important. She settled herself on my living room sofa with practiced elegance, crossing her legs and arranging herself like she was posing for a magazine. Jessica had always known how to present herself perfectly. Flawless makeup, designer clothes that somehow fit her retail worker's budget. Every word carefully chosen. David mentioned that you've been really smart about saving money over the years. That's incredible, truly incredible. But here's the thing, sweetheart, I actually work with financial planning now at the credit union downtown, and I see so many opportunities that could really help someone in your position. Jessica didn't work at any credit union. She worked part-time at a clothing boutique in the mall, but I didn't correct her. I just nodded and waited for her to continue. The problem is, with inflation the way it is, with everything getting more expensive, money that just sits there actually loses value over time. But if you invest it properly, with the right guidance, you could be living so much better. Maybe even help us out if we ever needed it. There it was again, the same song with a different singer. I appreciate your concern, Jessica, but I'm comfortable with how things are. But sweetheart, think about it. You're 68 years old. You need to be thinking about your future, about security. We could handle all the complicated stuff for you. You just need to sign a few papers, and that's it. No stress, no confusion. Sign a few papers. The trap served up with a smile and expensive cookies. No thank you, Jessica. I prefer to keep my affairs exactly as they are. I watched her smile tighten at the corners, saw the muscles around her mouth go rigid for just a moment before she forced them to relax again. Well, sweetheart, you know we only want what's best for you, but if you change your mind, we're here to help. She left with the same bright smile she'd arrived with. The cookies remained on my coffee table. I didn't touch them. I didn't want to eat anything that had come from those hands. That evening, my neighbor Maria Santos knocked on my door. Maria was 70, a retired teacher who'd moved to Phoenix from Mexico City 30 years ago. She lived in the small house next to mine, and we'd become close friends over the years. Maggie, I need to tell you something, and I hope you won't be upset with me for interfering. What is it, Maria? Last night, around 11 o'clock, I saw that girl, Jessica. going through your mailbox. She was taking pictures of envelopes with her phone, the ones with bank logos on them. When she saw me watching from my window, she pretended she was just checking for your packages. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice steady. Are you sure it was Jessica? Positive. I've seen her enough times to know. Maggie. I think she was looking for your financial information. Thank you for telling me. Maria, I'll handle this. But Maria wasn't finished. There's something else. Yesterday afternoon, I heard her on the phone in your driveway, talking loud enough for me to hear through my open window. She was telling someone about an old woman in the neighborhood who'd been stupid enough to trust her son with financial information. She was laughing about how easy it would be to clean her out. The pieces were falling into place now, forming a picture I didn't want to see but couldn't ignore any longer. Did she mention any names, I asked. No names, but Maggie. You're the only older woman on this street that her son has access to. I think she was talking about you. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about David's visit, about Jessica's financial planning lies, about her going through my mail like a thief in the night. I thought about how they'd coordinated their approaches, how they'd been studying me, planning this for who knows how long. And I realized that I wasn't just dealing with a son who needed money. I was dealing with predators who saw me as prey. Friday afternoon brought David back to my door, but this time he came with a different strategy. Gone was the pretense of casual visits and thoughtful gifts. This time, he arrived with desperation written across his face and a story that would reveal just how deep his troubles really ran. Mom, I need to ask you for something, and I need you to really listen to me this time. I let him in, though every instinct told me to keep the door closed. He paced around my living room like a caged animal, running his hands through his hair in that nervous gesture I remembered from his childhood. We're in serious trouble. Mom, Jessica, and we owe $28,500, and if we don't pay it back soon, we're going to lose everything. $28,500. The specific number told me he'd rehearsed this conversation, planned exactly what he would say. How did you accumulate that much debt? David, he stopped pacing and looked at me with eyes that held a mixture of shame and defiance. I've been gambling online. Mom, poker, sports betting, casino games. It started small, just for fun. But then I got in over my head. The truth hit me like a physical blow. My son wasn't just financially irresponsible. He was addicted to gambling, and Jessica had been enabling him, helping him find ways to feed that addiction. At first, I was winning, he continued, his voice gaining momentum like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I was actually ahead by thousands, but then I hit a losing streak, and I kept thinking I could win it back. I kept doubling down, borrowing more, betting more. And Jessica supported this. She believed in me. She knew I could turn it around. But now the creditors are calling every day. They're threatening to take our car, maybe even the house. Mom, I'm scared. For a moment, just a moment, I felt that old maternal instinct kick in, the urge to protect, to fix, to make everything better for my child. But then I remembered Jessica going through my mail, remembered their coordinated visits, remembered the conversation I'd overheard about cleaning out some old woman, David. I've helped you financially many times over the years. The down payment for your car, money for Jessica's medical bills, help with rent when you were between jobs. How much of that money went to gambling? His silence was answer enough. Most of it, he finally admitted. But this time is different. Mom, this time I'm getting help. I found a support group, and I'm going to stop. But first, I need to clear these debts. I need $28,500, and I need it now. I don't have that kind of money to give you, David. The lie came easily because I'd been practicing it in my mind since Maria told me about Jessica's phone call. Don't lie to me. Mom, I know you have way more than that. I've seen your bank statements when I've helped you with bills. You have over $80,000 just sitting there doing nothing. Those statements are private. David, you had no right to look at them. I'm your son. I'm your only family when you die. That money comes to me anyway. So why can't you help me now when I actually need it? The mask was completely off now. No more pretense. No more manipulation. Just raw greed and entitlement. Because that money represents 45 years of my life. David. 45 years of getting up before dawn, of working until my hands bled, of saving every penny I could so I wouldn't be a burden to anyone in my old age. A burden. You think helping your own son is being a burden. I think enabling your gambling addiction is not helping you. It's destroying you. He laughed, a bitter sound that held no humor. Enabling, you want to talk about enabling you, enabled Dad to drink himself into an early grave. You enabled me to be weak by always bailing me out. And now, when I'm finally asking for real help, you turn your back on me. The mention of his father's drinking problem, something we'd never discussed openly, hit me harder than I expected. Robert had struggled with alcohol, especially in his final years, and I had covered for him, made excuses, protected him from consequences. Your father's problems don't justify yours, David. Maybe not, but your money could solve mine. $28,500. Mom, that's nothing to you. It's everything to me. No, David, I won't give you money to gamble away. His face transformed then, shifting from pleading to something darker, something that actually frightened me. You know what? Mom, I'm tired of this. Tired of you hoarding money like some kind of dragon sitting on treasure. You're 68 years old. What are you saving it for? You're not going to live forever. I'm saving it so I can live independently, with dignity. Dignity. There's no dignity in being a selfish old woman who watches her own son suffer when she has the power to help. He moved closer to me, and for the first time in my life, I felt physically threatened by my own child. I'm not leaving here empty-handed. Mom, one way or another, Jessica and I are going to get what we need to survive. Are you threatening me, David? I'm telling you the truth. We're desperate. And desperate people do desperate things. He left without saying goodbye, slamming my door so hard that my windows rattled. I stood in my living room, shaking, finally understanding that I wasn't just dealing with a son who needed money. I was dealing with someone who felt entitled to take it, regardless of what I wanted. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to be a victim. I wasn't going to wait around for them to take what I'd spent a lifetime building. If David and Jessica wanted to play games, I would play too. But I would play to win. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystal clear Arizona sky that makes you believe anything is possible. I woke up at 5:30 earlier than usual, with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. I hadn't slept much after David's threats, but my mind was sharper than it had been in months. I dressed carefully in my best navy blue suit, the one I'd bought for Robert's funeral 13 years ago and had worn only to the most important occasions since. I brushed my silver hair until it shone and even applied a touch of lipstick. I wanted to look like exactly what I was, a competent, intelligent woman in complete control of her faculties. By 7:45, I was walking through the doors of Desert Community Credit Union on Indian School Road, just as they opened for business. The morning air was still cool, and I felt stronger with every step I took away from my house and toward protecting my future. "Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. What brings you in so early today?" The receptionist, a young woman about David's age, greeted me with professional warmth. I'd been banking here for over 20 years, and most of the staff knew me by name. "I need to speak with someone about my account immediately. It's urgent." They showed me into a small office where I met with Mr. James Anderson, the account manager who'd helped me set up my retirement savings years ago. He was a man in his 50s with kind eyes and the patient demeanor of someone who'd spent decades helping people protect their financial futures. "Mrs. Thompson, you've been with us for a long time. How can I help you today?" I sat across from him and placed my hands firmly on my purse. "Mr. Anderson, I need to make some serious changes to my account security. My family is attempting to access my money without my permission." His expression shifted immediately from professional courtesy to genuine concern. "I see. Unfortunately, this is more common than people realize, especially with elderly clients. We'll secure your account right away." We spent the next hour and a half implementing every security measure available. I changed my 4-digit PIN from David's birthday to a number that held meaning only for me. 80847, the month and year my mother was born, a woman David had never met since she'd passed away before he was born. We activated text message alerts for any transaction over $50. We set up requirements that any withdrawal over $500 would need my physical presence at the bank with 2 forms of identification. We created new security questions with answers only I would know. There's one more thing. "Mr. Anderson, I need to open a completely separate savings account." "A separate account?" "I want to transfer $82,000 from my current account into this new account. I'll leave only $500 in the account my son knows about." Mr. Anderson looked at me over his reading glasses, and I could see he understood exactly what I was doing. "That's a very intelligent strategy. Mrs. Thompson, if someone checks your primary account, they'll see a much lower balance. The bulk of your savings will be protected in an account they don't know exists." "Exactly. We opened the new account within 30 minutes. This account had no debit card attached to it, only a savings passbook that would be mailed to Helen Parker's address across town. Helen was my closest friend, a retired nurse who'd moved to Phoenix around the same time I had. I'd called her that morning to explain the situation, and she'd agreed immediately to help. We transferred $82,000 into the new account, leaving exactly $500 in my original checking account, enough to cover my monthly expenses, but not enough to make David and Jessica rich. "One final thing. Mr. Anderson, if anyone calls asking about my accounts, if anyone tries to access information or make transactions, I need to be notified immediately." "Absolutely. I'm putting a special alert on both accounts. No one will be able to get any information without your express written authorization." My next stop was the medical office of Dr. Michael Rodriguez, who'd been my physician for the past 12 years. I'd called ahead and explained that I needed comprehensive cognitive testing for legal purposes. "Mrs. Thompson, this is highly unusual. Has something happened?" I gave him a condensed version of the situation. I watched his face change from confusion to anger as I described David and Jessica's plans. "This is elder financial abuse. Mrs. Thompson, what they're attempting is not just morally wrong, it's illegal." "I know, Dr. Rodriguez. That's why I need documentation proving I'm mentally competent to make my own financial decisions." We spent 2 hours on comprehensive testing, memory assessments, cognitive function evaluations, mental status examinations. I answered every question, completed every task, demonstrated that my mind was as sharp as ever. "Miss Thompson, your cognitive function is excellent, better than many people 20 years younger. I'll prepare a detailed report stating that you are in perfect mental health and fully capable of managing your own affairs." My final appointment was with attorney Sarah Mitchell, Helen's niece who specialized in elder law. Her office was in a converted house in the Arcadia neighborhood, and she met me with the kind of professional compassion that told me she'd handled cases like mine before. "Mrs. Thompson, based on what Helen told me, you're dealing with attempted financial exploitation. What your son and daughter-in-law are planning constitutes elder abuse under Arizona law. I don't want to press criminal charges against my own son. Attorney Mitchell, I just want to protect myself legally." "I understand completely. Let's focus on protection rather than prosecution." We spent an hour documenting everything. Every threat David had made, every lie Jessica had told, every attempt they'd made to access my financial information. Attorney Mitchell helped me prepare a comprehensive file that would serve as evidence if they tried to have me declared incompetent. There's one more thing we should consider. Mrs. Thompson, a durable power of attorney document that specifically excludes your son from making financial decisions on your behalf. Is that necessary? Given what you've told me, yes. This document will make it legally impossible for him to claim any authority over your finances, even in a medical emergency. We prepared the paperwork immediately. By the time I left Attorney Mitchell's office, I had legal documentation proving my mental competency, medical records confirming my cognitive health, and ironclad protection for my financial assets. I returned home just after 2:30 in the afternoon, feeling like I'd won the first battle in a war I never wanted to fight. David's car wasn't in the driveway, which meant he and Jessica were probably somewhere planning their next move. But I was ready for them now. I had moved my money beyond their reach, documented their threats, and surrounded myself with professional allies who understood exactly what was happening. That evening, I sat in my favorite chair with a cup of tea and looked around my small house. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, but somehow it felt different. It felt like mine again. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. The next 3 days passed in an eerie silence. David didn't come home, didn't call, didn't send so much as a text message. It was as if he'd vanished from my life completely, and that absence worried me more than his presence had. In my experience, David's silence usually meant he was planning something. On Thursday evening, I was watering the small cactus garden in my backyard when I heard voices coming from the front of my house. I walked quietly to my living room window and peered through the blinds. David and Jessica were standing in my driveway, having what looked like an intense conversation. I couldn't make out their words, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. Jessica was gesticulating wildly, pointing toward my house, while David kept shaking his head and looking defeated. After about 10 minutes, they got back in their car and drove away without even attempting to knock on my door. That night, I made sure all my doors and windows were locked before going to bed. Something in their behavior had unsettled me, and I had the distinct feeling that whatever they were planning was about to happen. I was right. At exactly 3:20 in the morning, I heard my bedroom door open with the softest whisper of sound. I'd been lying awake for hours, my body tense with anticipation, so I was fully alert when it happened. I kept my breathing deep and even, my eyes closed, every muscle in my body relaxed. I had to appear to be in the deepest sleep of my life. David's footsteps approached my bed with the careful precision of someone who'd done this before. He stopped right beside me, so close I could smell his cologne, the same scent he'd worn since high school. For a moment, he just stood there, probably making sure I was truly asleep. Then I heard the soft sound of my purse being lifted from the nightstand, the gentle whisper of the zipper opening, the rustle of his fingers searching through my belongings. He found my wallet quickly. I heard him open it, heard the soft plastic sound of my debit card being removed. My heart was pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it, but I forced myself to remain perfectly still. There was a pause, probably while he was copying the card numbers into his phone. Then I heard him carefully replacing the card, closing my wallet, zipping up my purse, and setting it back exactly where he'd found it. The bedroom door closed with the same whispered sound it had opened with. I waited another 5 minutes before opening my eyes. A single tear rolled down my cheek, not because of the attempted theft, but because I had just witnessed the final death of the son I'd raised. The boy who used to crawl into this same bed during thunderstorms, who used to bring me dandelions he'd picked from the yard, who used to tell me I was the best mother in the world, was gone forever. In his place was a stranger who could sneak into my bedroom in the middle of the night and steal from me while I slept. I heard David leave the house, heard his car start and drive away. He was probably going to meet Jessica to plan their early morning trip to the ATM. I got up and went to my kitchen, where I made a cup of chamomile tea and sat by the window to wait for dawn. There was no point in trying to sleep now. In a few hours, Jessica would be standing at an ATM somewhere in Phoenix, trying to drain an account that held only $5,500 instead of the $87,500 they expected, and then they would learn that I was not the helpless old woman they thought I was. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. I dressed carefully, wanting to look strong and dignified for whatever confrontation was coming. I made coffee and toast, eating slowly while watching the clock. At exactly 7:15, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. 2 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. This time I answered. Mom, you have to help us. Something's wrong with your account. David's voice was high with panic, almost hysterical. Good morning, David. What seems to be the problem? The card doesn't work. Jessica's at the ATM right now, and it says insufficient funds. It says there's only $500 in your account. Mom, what happened to your money? I let the question hang in the air between us for several seconds, savoring the moment. What happened to my money, David? Or what happened to your plan to steal it? Silence on the other end. Complete, telling silence. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally said, but his voice was shaking. David, I heard you. I heard every word you said to Jessica on the phone 3 nights ago. I felt you come into my room last night like a thief and take my debit card. I know exactly what you were planning. Mom, I can explain. Explain what? How you were going to rob your own mother. How you've been planning this for weeks. How you sent Jessica to go through my mail and spy on my finances. I heard Jessica's voice in the background, shrill and angry, demanding to know what was happening. Where is the money? Mom, what did you do with it? I put it somewhere safe, somewhere you'll never be able to touch it. You can't do this to us, we're family. Family doesn't steal from each other. David, family doesn't sneak into bedrooms at night. Family doesn't lie and manipulate and threaten. Mom, please, we're desperate. They're going to take our house. They're going to ruin our credit forever. Then you should have thought about that before you started gambling. You should have gotten help instead of planning to rob me. I hung up before he could respond. 30 minutes later, they were at my front door, not knocking politely, but pounding with their fists, shouting my name. I opened the door calmly and looked at them both. David's face was red with fury and desperation. Jessica looked like she'd been crying, but her tears were tears of rage, not sadness. Where is our money? Jessica screamed before I could say a word. Your money, I wasn't aware I owed you anything. That money should be for the family, David shouted. I'm your only son. When you die, it comes to me anyway. When I die, David, you'll get whatever I choose to leave you. Right now, that's looking like very little. David pushed past me into my living room, Jessica right behind him. We're not leaving until you tell us where you moved the money. Then you'll be here for a very long time. Mom, listen to me carefully, David said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Jessica and I know people. People who can make your life very difficult if you don't cooperate. Are you threatening me, David? I'm telling you how things are going to be. You're going to transfer that money back to your regular account, and you're going to give us what we need to save our house. I walked to my phone and picked it up. I'm calling the police. No, you're not, Jessica said, stepping toward me. Because if you do, everyone in this neighborhood is going to know what kind of mother you really are. A mother who lets her own son lose his home rather than help him. I looked at both of them standing in my living room. These two people who had invaded my space, threatened my security, and stolen my peace of mind. And I realized I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt free. Get out of my house, I said quietly. Not until we get what we came for, David replied. Then I guess you'll be leaving in handcuffs. I dialed 911. The police arrived within 8 minutes. 2 officers, a middle-aged man and a younger woman, both professional and courteous. They listened to my explanation, took notes, and asked David and Jessica to leave my property immediately. "Ma'am, do you want to press charges for trespassing and attempted theft?" the female officer asked. I looked at David, standing in my driveway with his head down, and felt something I hadn't expected. Not anger, not satisfaction, but profound sadness for the man he'd become. "Not today," I said. "But I want this documented in case they come back." After the police left, I sat in my living room and cried. Not from fear or anger, but from relief. It was finally over. I had protected what was mine, defended my dignity, and reclaimed my home. The days that followed brought a peace I hadn't felt in months. I woke up each morning without that knot of anxiety in my stomach. I didn't have to check my purse every night to make sure my cards were still there. I didn't have to wonder what David and Jessica were plotting next. Helen Parker became a regular visitor, bringing groceries and staying for coffee while we talked about everything except my son. Maria Santos continued to be a wonderful neighbor, and we started taking evening walks together around the neighborhood. Pastor Williams from the Baptist church I'd attended for 15 years came by one afternoon. He'd heard about my situation through the church prayer network and wanted to offer support. "Maggie, I've seen this before. Children who lose their way, who forget the values they were raised with. It's one of the most painful things a parent can experience. I keep wondering if I failed him somehow, Pastor. If I did something wrong that led him to this." "You didn't fail him, Maggie. You gave him love, structure, and opportunities. What he chose to do with those gifts was his decision, not yours." Those words helped more than I can express. 3 weeks after the confrontation, I received a letter with no return address. Inside were 3 $100 bills and a note written in David's handwriting. "Mom, I'm sorry. This is all I can spare right now, but I wanted to pay back something. Maybe someday we can talk again." $300. Out of the thousands I'd loaned him over the years, out of the $28,500 he'd wanted to steal, he'd managed to scrape together $300. I put the money in an envelope and placed it in my desk drawer, not as a treasure, but as a reminder that even small gestures of accountability matter. 1 month later, Helen brought me my new savings passbook. I looked at the balance, $82,347, growing slowly with interest. It represented more than money now. It represented my independence, my dignity, my right to make my own decisions about my own life. I started volunteering at the Senior Resource Center downtown, helping other elderly people navigate financial scams and family manipulation. I discovered I wasn't alone. There were dozens of seniors in Phoenix dealing with similar situations. Children and grandchildren who saw their elderly relatives as ATM machines rather than human beings deserving of respect. My story became a source of strength for others. I spoke at community meetings, shared my experience with social workers, and helped other seniors develop strategies to protect themselves. 6 months after that terrible night, I was tending my cactus garden when I saw a familiar car drive slowly past my house. It was David, alone this time. Driving very slowly and looking toward my house, he didn't stop, didn't get out, just drove by like he was checking to see if I was still alive. I continued watering my plants, pretending I hadn't seen him. After a few minutes, he drove away. I haven't seen him since. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that moment when I first heard him planning to rob me. I think about that smile that came to my face, that moment of absolute clarity when I realized I had the power to protect myself. Those weren't just 45 minutes of preparation that changed everything. They were 45 minutes that reminded me who I really was. Not just David's mother, not just Robert's widow, but Margaret Thompson, a woman who had survived 68 years on this earth, who had worked for everything she had, who deserved to live with dignity and peace. Dr. Rodriguez tells me I'm healthier now than I was a year ago. The stress I was carrying has left my body. My blood pressure is better. I sleep more soundly, and I've even gained back some of the weight I'd lost from worry. "Maggie, you look like a woman at peace," he said during my last visit. And he's right. I am at peace. My house feels like home again. I've redecorated David's old room, turning it into a craft space where I make quilts for the church charity drive. I've planted new flowers in my garden. I've started reading books again, something I'd stopped doing when I was constantly worried about what David might do next. The money in my savings account continues to grow, but more importantly, so do I. I've learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. I've learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enabling. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to let them face the consequences of their choices. Every Sunday after church, I stay for coffee in the fellowship hall. Other women my age share their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. We laugh about things only women our age understand. And we support each other through the challenges that come with growing older in a world that often doesn't value our wisdom. One of them asked me about David recently. I haven't seen your son with you lately. Maggie, how is he doing? He's living his life, I replied with a calm smile. And I'm living mine. That's all that needs to be said. As I write this, the sun is setting over the Arizona desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that take my breath away. I'm sitting in my favorite chair, in my own house, surrounded by things I've chosen, protected by decisions I've made. I think about all the women like me, all the mothers and grandmothers who have been manipulated by their own families, who have been made to feel guilty for protecting what they've worked a lifetime to build. To them I say this: you are not selfish for wanting to keep what you've earned. You are not cruel for setting boundaries. You are not wrong for choosing your own well-being over someone else's poor choices. True love doesn't steal. True love doesn't manipulate. True love doesn't threaten or coerce or make you afraid in your own home. And if your family can't give you true love, then you have every right to find peace without them. Because at the end of every day, when you close your eyes and prepare for sleep, the only thing that truly matters is being able to rest with a clear conscience, knowing you've lived with dignity and protected what matters most. That's exactly how I sleep now, peacefully, safely, and completely free.